This story has two sightings in it. Both I'm severely scared of. I'm now 14 and I live in a small township in Pennsylvania called Springfield. Now my family owns 4 acres of land and most not fenced in, a pain in the ass to push mow. But we have a lot of property, about 10 acres of woods behind our fence. My family are Irish folks. We live in an urban area, and just yesterday someone just died in front of my house. Now getting to the actual story, my sister goes to a school far away from mine, and my mom is a nurse and my dad is in the military. So I'm often home alone. My house itself is about 130 years old, and we have a dog and 3 cats. One day I came home from school and thought I'd take a nap after eating some Greek yogurt. So I sat on my kitchen floor with my backpack still on, eating some yogurt. I got up and realized my dogs didn't bark when I walked in the house like they normally do. So I went to go check on them to let them outside. I walked into the living room and slowly opened the door to see all of them in the same corner of the room, whimpering and scared for their lives. I was extremely confused, and honestly I was scared because nothing ever scared my dogs like that. Now these are big dogs and could kill a person if they broke into the house, I'm sure. I decided to let it go and let them outside. I had to drag them outside because they just wouldn't move. When they got outside, they all dashed to the back corner of the property, just staring at the house. I left the room and opened the garage door to go do the laundry. Now my garage is dark and has a concrete floor. Picture is a creepy dark room, and that's pretty much it. I went to the laundry room and turned on some music, but my phone instantly died. I was pissed but confused because last time I checked, it was at 50%, and that was only 5 minutes ago. I finished the laundry and I was up to the living room door, but before I could turn the knob, I heard footsteps. Not just any footsteps, it sounded like someone was stopping. I put my ear up to the door and listened. They got closer and closer to the door I was at, until it hit the door and the noise just evaporated. Scared as hell, I opened the door and ran to the other room. I looked back to see a dark, tall figure staring back at me. I'm a pretty tall dude myself. I'm 6 feet tall, and this thing was easily taller than me, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. I freaked out and dropped the laundry and ran. That was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. The other was when I was asleep, and I woke up around 1 in the morning. I sat up in my bed, disoriented a little from just waking up, and instantly I was pushed down to my bed. I could feel someone's hands pushing down on my chest and on my neck, but no one was there. Then I could see a transparent figure towering over me. I tried to breathe, but I couldn't, and for 2 minutes, which seemed like an eternity, I tried to scream, but I couldn't say a word. After every little bit of air that left me, I could feel my body getting more limp. The ghoul-like hands evaporated into thin air, and I jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom. I locked the door and looked in the mirror. I had 2 large red imprints on my throat, shaped perfectly like hands. I sat with my dogs the rest of the night, all of us in the corner waiting to die. It sounds like some cheesy horror movie, but I lived it, and by God, it was the scariest thing I've ever been through. I honestly thought I was going to die. I still live in the same house, and every night something new happens. One night I had a can of fish food go flying across the room and hit me, to someone pushing me down the stairs. Thank you all for listening, and always know that wherever you are, you might not be safe, not even in your own home. This experience took place not too long ago for me. I'm an 18-year-old high school student, but I also work part-time for the city. I often work at different community centers and different lifeguard positions around town. At the time, I had been working at a local middle school, quite literally a few seconds away from my home. During the hours of 6:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m., the school gym is open to kids who want to come and play any sports. My job is to sit at the door, make sure that they sign in, and provide school identification, so we can be assured that they are under 18. Well, I remember this day particularly well, because that morning I had woken up with the worst cold ever and had opted to stay home from school because I felt so bad. Now, by the time 6 p.m. rolled around, I begrudgingly got up to get ready for work, not wanting to miss out on the opportunity to make a few bucks. This middle school I was not too familiar with, as I had just started the job only a few days before, and though I lived only a few seconds away, I had not gone to the school myself. So I arrived at the building and met up with my 2 other coworkers. The night usually goes as follows. One of us will sit outside the gym to assure that the kids sign in, and don't just wander around the rest of the school grounds. The remaining 2 will supervise the gym. As it so happens, that day was my turn to handle the sign-in desk. So I placed myself at the table, and I sat down to watch some Shane Dawson YouTube videos. Everything went as planned, and by the time 8 p.m. rolled around, it was pretty dark outside. 2 kids walked in, and they asked if it would be okay to go to their lockers, as one of them forgot to take their basketball shoes home. Now, the kids under no circumstances were allowed to go to any part of the school other than the gym and change rooms, so I told them so, and they dejectedly walked to the gym. I sat back down and returned to my videos. Only a few moments later, I watched them try and sneak around me to the lockers. So, inconvenienced, I got up and followed them to the main part of the school, ready to give them a good lecture. The school is situated in a way where the main hub of the school is where all the lockers are placed in rows, kind of like bookshelves in a library. So as I made my way past the rows, looking down each one to find those boys, I found them and told them that if they tried that again, I would have to kick them out. They once again dejectedly walked back to the gym, leaving me alone in the dark hallway of lockers. I gave a quick check to see if there was still anyone in the hallway and started to make my way back, when suddenly a loud thwack echoed and startled me. I freaked out. I assumed it was those boys trying to play a trick on me. So I very loudly sighed and called out, "I know you're upset, but I don't make the rules." But no one answered. I stayed where I was because I had to make sure those boys weren't still wandering around, or I could seriously lose my job. I walked around a bit. I even yelled hello out loud a few times. Still, no one answered. I grew a bit nervous, and I was contemplating making a run back to my post. But then the noise sounded again. Once more, I jumped, and I became extremely scared. I am naturally a scaredy cat, and I just wanted to hightail it out of there. But before I could try to leave, something caught my attention. I could see a person in the classroom at the far end of the hall. I could not make out any features, but I saw a fairly tall, black silhouette through the window of the door of the classroom. Now at this point, I was scared beyond belief, so all rationality was thrown out the window. I wanted to move, but I was paralyzed. I could see the figure slowly get close to the window. All the while, my heart was pounding wildly. Once it reached that window, it placed its palm on the glass. Now, if you know me, I'm as blind as a bat without my glasses. And even with its close proximity, I could not make out any features. I stood still, and I stared at it. Seconds started to feel like minutes, and then, finally, the locker next to me flew wide open, and it spooked me so much I flew down the hall and back to the gym. There, I bumped into my coworker, who had rightfully started to question why I was no longer at the desk. Embarrassed, I had told her I'd just gone down to the washroom. She was a little bit skeptical, but she said okay and asked if I wanted to switch spots. I eagerly agreed. As I sat down in the gym with my heart still pounding, I looked around and I noticed the boys I had initially been reprimanding were in the gym engaged in a pretty intense game, and therefore could not have been the ones messing with me. Eventually, being in the presence of so many other people started to calm me a little, and I was able to think rationally. It could have been a janitor from the school in the classroom, but that would have been seriously strange considering he and I talk to each other every day. We know each other very well. If it was him, he would have come out and talked to me, or at least waved. Not only that, it doesn't quite explain the locker door just flying open, violently on its own. I still work there and to this day, and nothing has happened ever since, but I still refuse to venture any deeper into that school than the athletic center.
I was 10 when this happened, and it happened at my school. I was at lunch recess with my friends Andrew, Loralee, and Melissa. We were getting bored, and we did not know what to do. So I asked them if they'd ever heard of the game Charlie Charlie. They said they did. I asked if they wanted to play, and they agreed. So I went inside and got a piece of paper and 2 sharpened pencils. When I got outside, I drew a big cross in the paper and wrote yes on the upper left corner, no on the upper right, yes on the bottom right corner, and no on the bottom left corner. and we made sure it wasn't windy. Thankfully it wasn't, but it was really hot that day. We walked on over to the shade and balanced 2 pencils on the paper. I couldn't do it, so I told Andrew to do it. He struggled a little bit, then finally balanced the pencils. We stood up and walked far away from the piece of paper, far enough that no one could blow on it. Then Andrew said, "Charlie, Charlie, are you here?" The pencils did not move, so we tried again. "Charlie, Charlie, are you here?" The pencils still didn't move. We tried one more time. Then one of the pencils moved to yes. We kind of freaked out. I don't think any of us expected anything to happen. Andrew continued though. "Charlie, Charlie, are you going to kill me?" It once more moved to yes. At this point we were all ecstatic and frightened, but we wanted more. So the next time recess rolled around, we played Charlie, Charlie again. This time a lot of other kids crowded up around the paper. There were a lot of kids asking questions, screaming in excitement and fear, watching the pencils move, watching as Charlie said that they were going to kill someone. And what was really weird was that over the next few weeks, Andrew was in the hospital. He was really sick. Luckily he got better, but we were all a little hesitant to play Charlie, Charlie again after that. As I'm typing this, the events I'll be talking about happened 3 months ago and about a week and a half ago, respectively. As a bit of background information, I'm almost 14 years old, and I'm a guy. I currently live in a house with my family, and ours is the first family or anybody to live in this house, which makes the story that much more chilling. In my family, I have a brother, my mother, my father, and our family German Shepherd. And occasionally my sister is in the house, but when these events took place, she was not in the house. The first of these very strange events happened close to the middle of June in 2016. One night around 11:10 p.m. I was in my bedroom, and in my room between my bed and the wall, there's about 1 inch of space. And in a clear-as-day voice, I heard a voice I recognized say my name from right behind me, almost in my ear. For me, the scariest part about this voice was the fact that it was the voice of my first ever friend, who I met 10 years ago in kindergarten, but who I also moved away from about 3 months later. So I didn't get to know her that well. When I heard something saying my name, I sat up instantly like a bow when the string is released. I looked around me in the darkness of my room and saw absolutely nothing. But that wasn't nearly the creepiest part. That was to come the next night. The next night, when I was in bed again, around the same time I heard the same voice from the same place say something. I've forgotten what she said, but I sat up like I did the night before, and I whispered a few questions. I couldn't talk very loud, because my parents were sleeping only about 10 yards away in their room, and I asked, "Where do you live?" And what I heard next was the scariest, yet most comforting thing I'd ever heard in my life, and the response I got came from my closet, which is about 6 or 7 yards from the foot of my bed. I heard the spirit. I heard her say in a voice that was fading away as she spoke, "I live in here." Now, my mother also had an encounter of her own that told me that I was not crazy. As of writing this, it happened only about a week or 2 ago. My dad usually leaves for work at about 4 in the morning to beat rush hour traffic, and my mom at about 5 in the morning. She saw this silhouette standing in the 6-foot-long hallway between the master bedroom and the master bathroom. She asked it, and I believe she thought it was my dad. "What are you still doing here?" It gave no physical or vocal response. Then she nearly yelled at it, and again, still no response. That's when she decided she must be seeing things, or still partially asleep, so she just went back to bed. And I remember I'd only told a few of my friends at school about my own encounters. The only reason I know about what happened to her is because she brought it up the next night at dinner. Hello all, my name is Kiana. Last year, I got accepted into cosmetology at the local college in my town. I was super excited, but also I felt terrible about burning holes into my grandparents' pockets. I am not a college student, but I did get accepted as a junior in high school. A little background on me, I'm a bubbly and positive girl. I I was always very nice to everyone I met, but I can be super shy at times, so making friends was a bit complicated once I got there. Class was normal the first few weeks. I worked hard in the class too. In that class, to practice hair, we had a mannequin. It was just a head with real human hair and painted on eyes and makeup. It was like a doll, and I loved dolls. Being as girly as I am, I was good at cutting hair on my mannequin, and it was really fun to do her hair. I was a little behind on hours for the class, so I had to start going in early and staying late. One day I came in so early, some of the girls weren't there. I was so sleepy and grumpy walking in. Once I walked in, I picked up my mannequin and sleepily put her on the mannequin stand. When I began running my hands through her hair, I looked at the mirror and noticed her face. There were dried water stains going down from her eyes. Streaks of water. They looked exactly like she had been crying. I shook it off as I grabbed a napkin with water and wiped off her face. I laughed, trying to calm myself, and I assured the mannequin that I know I'm not too good at braids, and I said sorry when I pulled her hair. Yes, I was joking. It's strange to just talk to my mannequin. But not only did my instructor tell us to talk to mannequins like clients, I also wanted to ease my mind from thinking crazy. I hadn't washed her hair lately, so the water stains couldn't have been that. The rest of the day was quite normal, and the next day I walked in early again, more energized than before. I cheerfully stretched, seeing no one there again. I looked up at the mannequin on the shelf, her face turned away from me. That's not how I left her the day before. Again, I shrugged it off and assumed that someone had moved it. I then stretched my arm out to grab her, and when I turned her around, I literally screamed and dropped her to the floor. I was starting to think this was some kind of sick joke. My mannequin's face was freaking melted, her eyes half gone and her mouth gaping open from the burning hole in it. The side of her face completely burnt, and the bottom where her name was written, Miss Sophia, was scratched away, now saying Miss, and that's it. I know for a fact I did not burn my mannequin, so I was angry that someone did. She looked terrifying, like she was rotting or something. Suddenly, another mannequin fell from the shelf, the same shelf I'd gotten mine from. I screamed again as it crashed to the floor. I could see its face, and it was melted as well, her eyes completely gone. That was enough for the day. I quickly rubbed out, and I told my teacher what happened later. No one admitted to burning them. Needless to say, my teacher was pissed. We had to get new ones, but this experience really shocked me. Now I don't go early anymore, and it's hard to look at my new mannequin, thinking she'll look distorted and evil too one day when I turn her around.
I've always been a staunch believer in the paranormal, but even I can separate fact from fiction. Ever since my mother and I moved into our new house in a semi-ghetto neighborhood, by which I mean one block is upscale and the next varying degrees of rundown, we've gotten every pest from bugs to rodents. My mother seems to take it all in stride, leaving me to deal with the infestations on my own. Well, all was pretty manageable until the mice started showing up. I would feel my bed moving around at night, wondering if they were crawling down below me. So I would slip the covers under my feet and wrap up cocoon-like, so nothing could get to me. My anxiety began to grow as it happened every night, and we caught the little things in small white traps. It got to the point where we had no choice but to spend more of our money on what is essentially a house that didn't pass inspection. The feeling of my bed moving continued for months until one night, after having gotten down and looking under, I determined there were no signs of mice or anything there at all. There was no signs of gnawing, scratches, anything. Nothing that would indicate that the treatments weren't working. Lying down, I commanded in the name of God for whatever it was to leave me alone. And with that, the bed stopped squirming. It stopped moving. I grabbed my small head pillow and went to sleep. A few nights later, with great relief that my bed no longer shook, and with the added protection of a metal rosary over my bed, I awoke to the feeling of someone or something standing over me. Awake, unafraid but definitely startled, I looked over my shoulder to see nothing. I tried rationalizing this when I saw the pillow in my arms begin to be pressed down. Keep in mind, I was wide awake. I was not paralyzed, I was not afraid, this was real life, and there was no transition to a fully aware state of mind. I was already there. The pillow pushed down as if a hand lay on it. so it could free up my arms for something more, or because it was curious. Furious, I grabbed my pillow and yelled for the invisible force to leave. I shouted in the name of God and fiercely banished whatever it was. Like a rush of sentient wind, it swept away and out of my closed window. I laid back down and, a little bewildered, I finally went back to sleep. Though I still get the occasional pests, I have never felt my bed move again. And thankfully nothing else has happened. I feel a little guilty that I drove out the very thing I was always interested in, the paranormal, but some things are best left to TV or the imagination. I am a teenager, and I'll try not to make this story too long, but I can't promise anything. I've always been into the paranormal. It's just something I've always been interested in. I'm also Wiccan because of my mother. Me and my friend, let's call her Kat, wanted to have a sleepover. It was getting closer towards the end of summer, and we wanted to hang out again before school started. We did end up having one, but it wasn't something that I'd ever imagined to happen. Basically, she came over and we watched a few videos. We were watching YouTube, to be specific. The first weird thing that happened was that everyone in the house heard a big banging sound, which startled everyone in the household, even me. We found out our neighbors shot off a firework or something like that, but the weird part was that it wasn't even aiming near our house, and the thing didn't fall sideways in our house's direction. All in all, it wasn't even close to us, so that was a little odd. The next thing is something that I didn't believe at first. Kat and myself were just watching more videos. They were paranormal videos because we were planning on playing with the Ouija board, and we wanted to study up into it. Suddenly, my door opened. I thought it was my mother checking in on us, but no one was there when the door was opened. So that freaked out my friend Kat a little bit, saying that it must have been something in my house. But I reassured her it must have been a draft, even though I knew we've never had drafts in our house before. The final experience was right before we were going to play with the Ouija board. I have a hot tub in my house, and we have a pool as well. So first we went into the hot tub, and after a little bit, we went into the pool and were acting like idiots, just splashing each other and all that jazz. We started to get chilly, so we went back to the hot tub. However, as soon as we stepped back inside, all the torches that were set up by my back porch went out, and there was no reason as to why it happened. There wasn't any strong winds or anything like that. Of course, we ran inside, obviously freaked out and on edge. Still though, I wanted to do the Ouija board session. The board was made up by the two of us, me cutting it out and her drawing the letters and numbers on the board. To be honest, I don't have the best handwriting. After that, I got a shot glass for us to use as the planchette. We were going to light up some candles, but the ladder I had went missing, and I couldn't find it. In the end, we didn't have any candles to light. At first, when we asked if anyone was there, we didn't really get a response. So I was kind of sad about that. But slowly it began to move, and of course I thought Kat was doing it, but she swore to me she wasn't. I knew I wasn't moving it because my finger was just barely on top of the shot glass. We decided to say goodbye to the spirit, because it wasn't really doing that much, which some would think is dumb, but I have to agree with them, because it was a stupid thing to do in the first place. We weren't trying to mess around with anything. We knew the dangers of asking certain questions and what the signs of a spirit trying to escape the board were, so we were totally serious about all of this. After a while, we decided to start a new session, and this time we got a pretty good response. We asked who it was, and he spelled out the name Ron. Later we found out that his full name was Ronnie. Ron was his nickname. He said he was a good spirit, and that he died at the age of 15. We asked what he looked like, and he said that he had blonde hair and either gray or green eyes. I can't remember what. At that moment I felt cold in certain places, and it was hot outside, and there was no wind from a fan or any draft inside my room. But it didn't give me bad vibes at first. I was beginning to get a little suspicious, so I tested Ron to see if he knew the answer to the questions that I was asking. I was suspicious that Kat was still moving it. In the end, he got all the answers correct, which made me confirm that this was the real deal. I really wanted to get the videotape, but I didn't want to leave the board, and I did not want to anger Ron, so I ended up asking if I could, and he said no. My friend Kat was aware that I've had weird experiences before. One time I felt weight on the edge of my bed as if someone was sitting there, but I was the only one in my room that day. I had also felt people's hands on me at night, though there was no one in my room, and apparently it had been Ron doing it. I was beginning to have back pains, which made me want to end the session and go to sleep. Kat didn't want to, and Ron didn't want to end it either. and suddenly I felt a coldness all over my back, as if he was trying to make the pain go away. It worked, but I was still shocked and creeped out by it. Finally, I was done, I was worn out, and I was ready to say goodbye. I put the board in my closet, and we went off to bed. Before we went to sleep, Kat told me that she wanted to do it again in the morning, so I agreed with her, but I sort of wished that I didn't. Morning came and I was the first one up, but Kat didn't take too long before she was up too. We got the board out and began to play. This time we did not get Ron, but another spirit. It was a female apparently, but it told us its name was John, which was confusing because that's usually a guy's name. She said she died when she was 47 years old, and I didn't like her at all. I felt like something was hurting my hand while we were playing. I'll describe it as best as I can. You know the fat below your thumb on the inside of your palm? It felt like someone was digging their nails into that part of my skin, despite nothing being there. I kept telling Kat that we should end the session. I wouldn't say why either, I just wanted to stop. So she listened to me and we finally said goodbye. I explained what happened and she got a little nervous, but what happened next was even creepier. Something was holding on to Kat's arm, and she couldn't move it no matter how hard she tried. I literally had to yank her arm back, and we were both definitely done at that point. A few days passed after that, and I finally decided to tell my mother that we had played with a Ouija board. She scolded me, but she wasn't too mad. In the end, I threw the board away, and I hoped that all of this would be done. But it wasn't. One day, I didn't go into my room immediately like I usually do. I was playing with our cat. Finally, I went to my room, and right on my bed facing upward was the board that I threw away the other night. I yelled for my mom and showed it to her. She swore that it wasn't her, and I asked my sister. She said the same thing. Again, I threw it away, and this time it was gone for good. Now, this was recent. It literally happened a weekend ago. I was having another sleepover with Kat. This time we decided to do a spirit box, and holy crap did we get a response. Something said my name, and I never noticed until I listened to a recording on my phone. I was scared to death, especially considering that it called me by a nickname that an old friend used to call me. I've never gotten bad vibes in my house before, and no one's ever died in my house that I know of. So how all of this is happening is something I don't know. But I do know that I might find some answers in the future. I'll just have to wait and see.
This happened 2 years ago, when I was a freshman at Northgate High School. But before I tell you what happened to me, I have to tell you about my school's history. You see, my school has two buildings, the main building and the 9th grade building, which is located right next to the main one. The 9th grade building was built on land that was originally owned by a slave owner, way back in the 1800s, and so it has a graveyard by the outside lunch area. The slave owner loved to beat his slaves daily, and often they would die by mistake. Although he is dead now, the story goes he did not go peacefully. One early morning, one of his slaves was making him breakfast, eggs and bacon, his favorite meal, while he was sitting and reading. After all the abuse she and her family had suffered at the hands of this slave owner, she took the frying pan with hot bacon grease still in it, and hit the slave owner over his head, knocking him down and pouring the boiling hot grease on his face. As he lay on the floor yelling in agony and screaming threats of torture and death to her, she had already come this far, and she continued to beat her former master to death. Many years later, after his death, the 9th grade building had been finished and was in use. Now, how does this affect me? Well, you see, there was a rumor going around that if you were in the school in the morning or late in the evening, you will smell bacon, no matter what part of the building you're in. Some have even claimed to see a figure sitting in the lunchroom, or standing just outside of your view, meaning they've only caught a glance of it. This was not my case, however. After failing a Spanish 1 quiz, I asked if I could retake it, and my Spanish teacher said yes. They asked if I could stay after school or come early in the morning. As I couldn't stay after school since it was my week with my dad, which only happens every 2 months or so, I decided I could come early in the morning. After I was dropped off, I headed toward the 9th grade building to do my retake. On the way to the classroom, I smelled bacon. I have heard the rumors, and I was immediately on edge. I went into the cafeteria and looked around to see if there were any lunch ladies in there. Unfortunately, there wasn't. So now I've gone from on edge to creeped out. I decided to leave the building. However, the doors closed behind me, and they would not budge now. I was definitely scared at that point. I started to panic a little, wondering what was going on. And then I noticed something. To be a little ball of black fire. It grew bigger and bigger, and then began to change forms, and soon I recognized a human shape. Its face was still just fire, but its body was like that of a Confederate soldier, gray and decorated in medals and badges. I was in total shock. I had always believed in ghosts, demons, angels, but I never thought I'd see anything like this. Then it started to move not slowly or hastily, but for lack of a better analogy, but like a pixelated game character, swaying back and forth, repeating the same motions. Then I suddenly heard a voice. "I'm sorry for what I've done." At that moment, another ball of fire appeared, but this time it was white, and the human figure burned away until it was back in the form of a ball, and then it began to fade away. But unlike the first ball, the second was still there, and I heard a different voice say something else that I can barely understand. I think it said, "You shall never be forgiven." Then, just like the one before it, it disappeared. Now thoroughly confused and horrified, I tried the doors again, and to my relief they opened. I did manage to finally take my retake, but it took me almost an hour, even though it was only 20 questions. I was still in shock over the whole thing. I had so many questions about what happened, I don't think I'll ever get the answers I want. What were they? Why did they appear to me? And why didn't the second ball of fire change shape? Luckily, I have never gone back to the 9th grade building since the beginning of my 10th grade year. And hopefully I will never go back. I have told this to a few friends and family members, but most just write it off as a bad dream, or they think I'm making this all up. But some do believe, and we are worried that something else might happen. Fortunately, nothing has, and I hope it stays that way.
When I was about 7 years old, me, my mom, dad, older sister Laura, and older brother Steven moved into a 2-story suburban house. We came from an apartment that was getting too small for us. Anyways, during the first 2 weeks of trying to sleep in my room in our new home, there were some nights when I would see the hallway light come on, because I could see the light shine through the cracks of my door, creating a rectangular glow. I wouldn't hear the click of the light switch come on, nor would I hear any doors open. This would happen at late hours in the night, almost every night between 12 and 4 in the morning. And to make things worse, I would also hear footsteps in the hallway. I tried not to think too much into it. I thought maybe someone got up to use the restroom or to get a glass of water, something. And sometimes that was true. I would hear someone in the bathroom, or I would hear someone go downstairs and open and close the fridge door. However, on a couple of nights, the hall light would stay off, but I would still hear those footsteps, and on a few occasions in the night, it sounded like whoever or whatever it was pacing back and forth, up and down the hallway, and frighteningly, I heard whoever or whatever this was stop right outside my door a couple of times. I held my breath and tensed up a bit, listening very closely, but I could not hear any breathing outside my door. Eventually, I'd hear it step back from my door and continue to walk around the hallway, outside my door again. I suppose it could have been my brother or sister, but it just didn't feel like it was. This presence didn't feel like anyone from my family, and it did not sound like they're walking. I know that sounds strange, but these footsteps were clear and had an almost heavy thud to them. So, the next morning, I separately asked each person in my family if they ever woke up last night, or were at least in the hallway. Most responded with a, "What are you talking about?" followed by a, "No, I slept all night and I never got up." I told them that I had heard footsteps in the hallway, and I saw the light come on, but none of them heard any footsteps or noticed the light themselves, and so they just brushed it off. Just saying like, that's strange that you experienced that. Fast forward several years later, I'm about 16 years old, in high school, living in the same house, listening to some violent music while home alone. Through the music I hear a thud that sounded like something hitting the hallway wall. It sounded like it came from outside my room, to the left, that leads down the staircase. I poked my head out of the doorway, assuming it was one of my cats or my dog playing around. But instead of seeing a pet or nothing at all, I see a very tall, 7-foot maybe larger dark figure. It's very thin, and it's staring right at me. The upper half of its body was sticking out from behind the corner from the top of my staircase. I stood frozen, and we just glared at one another. Finally, this thing moved very rapidly out of view down the stairs. Oddly enough, there were no stopping or stepping sounds like a person would normally make if they ran downstairs. I gasped audibly, slammed my door, and turned off the music. I stood inside my room next to my door listening, and petrified. I grabbed a knife in my room and just waited in there listening, but hearing nothing but absolute silence. I knew my brother was coming home soon, so I just waited in my room, knife in hand, until he finally arrived 20 minutes later. Then and only then did I leave my room. 1 year later, my sister Laura and I were still attending the same high school, and on this day the school had a minimum day schedule, where the school lets the students go home early at around noon. My sister Laura brought her friend Kate with us to our house, because we knew nobody would be home, and we'd have the house to ourselves. I had a thing for Kate. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was and still is an attractive girl, and now woman. The three of us were just hanging out on the couch together, talking and watching TV. Kate recently moved into a new house closer to us in town. She was explaining to my sister and I how she thought her house was creepy and haunted, and then she felt like whatever was haunting it followed her outside of her house too. Laura and I took turns explaining strange things that we'd experienced as well. While on these topics, we all started to get creeped out, even though it was bright outside and in the middle of a nice sunny day. Kate started to look visibly upset because her eyes began to water. She then said, "We should go somewhere." Right after Kate said that, my sister asked in a panicked tone, "Do you guys hear that?" I muted the TV, and, in fear, we all listened quietly. It was just a few seconds of total silence. Then suddenly we heard, step, 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 upstairs, like someone was walking around up there. We all looked at each other with wide eyes and with fear clearly seen on each other's faces, mixed with the look of what the heck are we going to do now? Laura and I always keep the doors locked, so we were pretty confident nobody should be up there. We all stand up and walk to the kitchen, grabbing knives. We start to head upstairs. There is nothing but silence though. We keep going, trying to be as quiet as possible, but occasionally whispering about how scary this is. I was in front because I felt being the only male I may have an advantage if I had to encounter someone. Plus, I wanted to impress Kate by showing her that I wasn't scared, even though I thought my heart was going to burst. We began to check every room, and I was ready to stab someone as I began to look in closets and under beds, anywhere someone could hide, with my sister and Kate following me. We start with the rooms closest to the top of the stairs, and we make our way toward the rooms at the end of the hallway. I felt adrenaline flowing in my veins, more than I've ever felt in my life, because now, there are only 2 rooms left to search, both at the end of the hall. These rooms are across from one another. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I decided to check the room on the left first, as the door was already slightly open, and the door on the right was closed. While the girls watched the door on the right side, I walked into the room, but I saw nothing. So I guessed it was time to search the final room on the right, which had its door closed. I was pretty confident that there was nobody in the other rooms we just searched, and if someone or something was in my house, this was going to be the room they were hiding in. I paused for a second outside the room with my heart continuing to pound away in my chest. I could hear my heart palpitating in my eardrums, and there was sweat dripping down my forehead. I paused outside the door for a while, thinking of the possible life and death fight that might occur when I opened the last door. Finally, I grabbed the door handle, twist it slowly, and swing the door open as fast as I could, knife held tightly in my hand, expecting a fight. The room was empty. But there is a closet in there too, and its door was closed as well. Still in fight mode, I paused a second outside the closet door, trying to regain control of my breathing. While making sure I got a good grip on my knife, I slowly reached for the closet handle, then opened the door quickly and violently, knife ready still. But, again, nobody, nothing was in there. The closet was empty. We checked under the bed, and still nothing. There was no one in the room. With the 3 of us cursing and trying to calm down, we make our way back downstairs. We put the knives away and sat back down on the couch. I unmute the TV, and we begin to talk and relax again. But this break was short-lived, because about 2 minutes later, we hear the footsteps again. This time the stomp was louder, coming from the upstairs. These steps sounded deliberate, and were clearly heard, as if whatever it was wanted us to hear it walking. I mute the TV again, and this time, I yell towards the direction of the stairs, angrily. "Hello? Who is it? I've got a knife." Then there was silence again, and at that moment Kate started tearing up. She's obviously upset and on the verge of crying. Laura and I ask, "Are you feeling alright?" She responds, "No, I feel sick guys, I want to go home." Right after she says this, she quickly looks to her right, which is where the kitchen is. When she does this, my sister and I also look in the same direction, and we all nearly jump out of our skins as we clearly see an older woman standing there. My eyes are beginning to tear up, and I'm getting goosebumps as I'm thinking about it again. I only saw her for about 2 seconds, maybe 3, but it felt like much longer. She drifted backwards out of view like she was walking into the living room and sort of faded away. We froze, and after a few moments my sister says out loud, "Hello?" No response. We get up to go and look into the living room, and once again there's nobody, nothing, and there's no place to hide in that room. I remember a lot of details about her appearance, even though I saw her briefly. The appearance of this woman in my kitchen happened so quick that when I saw her and then nearly had a heart attack, she was gone. We sat back down, and at this point Kate is now straight crying. I ask, "Can you, tell me what you just saw?" Kate nods and my sister says, "Yes." I say, "Oh my God, this is crazy," followed by a few more, "What is happenings?" I know what I saw, and as I was beginning to describe them what the woman looked like, they not only agreed with me, but they even finished a few of my sentences describing the details of this woman's appearance. This woman looked like an ordinary woman in her late 70s or early 80s. She didn't have evil black eyes, she just had brown eyes. She had no exposed bones in her face, no blood or other things like that. She didn't look dead or injured. She was about 5'6" and 180 pounds. She was white, with gray curly hair that was parted down the middle that went down to her neck. She was wearing a fairly large, lightly colored pinkish-white t-shirt and jeans. She looked like someone's grandma, basically just hanging out with us. However, I will never forget the look she had on her face. It was the look as if we had just woken her up from bed late at night. She looked extremely angry. Her eyebrows weren't scrunched up, she just had this blank expression on her face, but her mouth was slightly open, and her eyes, she had large glaring eyes, as she looked right into my own, that expressed nothing but an extreme hatred towards me, as if she was speaking with her eyes to me these words, "I will kill you all." I was more terrified when I saw her than I've ever been. The image of her still burned into my memory to this day. So I was always a quiet boy. I was the kid that teachers set the talkers next to, the one who wouldn't talk back. They loved me, I got good grades, and I never got in trouble. And this experience started taking place 3 years ago. I always felt watched while I slept, even though I closed my door and windows, and the windows were completely covered. Every morning when I woke up, something seemed to have moved. This had been happening for a few years, and just recently, I had made and installed several sensors in my room. I looked through the logs every morning. They occasionally would pick up something small, but this morning it was a huge amount of activity. Honestly, I was scared, and I knew that all my family were innocent. The door never moved, neither did the windows. Nothing in my room had seemed to have moved, so I went about my day. At school, I finally joined a group of friends, and almost immediately I became one of their go-to people. This was weird because I was antisocial, but here I was, able to tell them to follow me somewhere and they would. Fast forward a few months and my report came through. All the teachers I had at the time picked up on my new leadership, and they commented on it. A few days later, I got into trouble, unfairly. I emailed the teacher and the next day she came to me, seemingly frightened. I was off the hook, and she was always scared of me from then on. I didn't even do much in the email. Fast forward to about 1 year ago, my group had broken up, and I was again alone and antisocial. I decided to test something. I joined a well-known and rather hard group to get into. None of them even knew me, yet 2 weeks later, there I was, their go-to person. I tried not to make myself noticed, and I hardly said anything, yet they still had me as their leader. And that night, I had a dream. You may say it was just my imagination, but I could feel it was more. It also didn't help that this is the only dream I've ever remembered. I was a leader, possibly a king, and I was telling people to do things, preparing for something. I went through this dream and it followed through with an attack on my kingdom. I looked the details up in the morning. They seemed to line up with Alfred the Great. I was not good at history, and I had not heard of him until now, but almost everything lined up. The teachers after this noticed a boost in my confidence. I noticed that despite everything, people noticed me now. People knew me. People listened. I seem to have gained an aura from that night, but I still don't know what it is. My reflexes even seem to have improved, and I don't think it's possession, I think it's something else. One person said that I have a more regal feel around me after that night. Nothing else has happened since, but this aura seems to be getting stronger as of late. Perhaps I've picked up an old soul that is guiding me. I haven't told anyone about this, but it has all been released now. I hope that whatever happens next is good, or who knows in our current world. Still though, I can't help but wonder, why was that teacher so scared of me? When I was around 5 or 6 years old, my family tended to host multiple birthday parties for different groups of people at different places. One of these parties, a female friends-only party in the woods near my house, had several extremely weird occurrences happen. Now I love the forest, and I constantly went on hikes and animal watch with my parents. Yet, never before this did I fear those woods until my 6th birthday party. The party was set in a pretty little clearing. There were tables and even a small bouncy house set up. My mother even got a friend to dress up as Jack Sparrow, do some pretty good impressions for the party, because at the time I was in love with the Pirates of the Caribbean. So the other kids and myself were running about foolishly, playing freeze tag or something of the sort. I was getting creeped out, because whenever I said anything, loud crackling would come over my voice from the tree line. I thought it was my friend, and for privacy reasons we'll call her Taylor. She liked to play pranks on me, so I went and told my mom about the crackling and who I thought it was. She just said I should keep playing until it was present time. We found that the presents had been hidden around like an Easter egg hunt, only the adults didn't do it. After all the presents had been found and opened, it was cake time. While I was just eating, I wanted to go get a drink, so I left. And when I returned, my little plastic fork was gone. So I went to go get another, and when I came back, my fork was there, so I put the other away. That was weird. I had just looked there and the fork wasn't there. Anyway, when I came back from putting the other fork away that I didn't need anymore, my original fork was gone again. Once again I suspected Taylor was pranking me, and then I accused her of it. She denied and said my fork kept sliding off and back onto the table. That didn't make any sense. I checked my chair and sure enough, there it was. Extremely confused, I apologized to Taylor and resumed eating. Nothing else really happened the rest of the day except one thing. One of my Barbie dolls from my room, one that I didn't play with outside, ended up in the bushes. The thing is, I hadn't seen anyone go into my room that day, and I didn't see anyone in that particular area in the woods. I think these experiences were more confusing than they were terrifying. This is my first time submitting a story, so it might be a bit short. Some background first. In my town for a year or two, I had to go to an old middle school in my district. It was built on an all-girls academy from the early 1900s. The school had 3 teachers, who were nicknamed the Black Sisters. Their names were Virginia, Caroline, and Mary. They had an interesting hobby of killing those around them for the insurance money. And now their ghosts are said to haunt the middle school, which I must add is no longer being used to teach kids after my stint there. Now, on to the story. When I was in 6th grade, I had to go a town over to get to school, due to the fact that the high schoolers were in my town's middle school. The school was not built to hold that amount of students who were there at the time, so some classes had to use trailers. I was in one of those classes. One day that winter, I needed to go to the bathroom, and part of me was just bored. So I walked out of the trailer door and into the main building. The door was at the end of a long hallway. Its walls were covered with lockers and classroom doors, with the bathroom near an intersection. The way down was uneventful. I did my business and walked out. Nothing spooky. But on my way back, I made the immature decision to talk the ghost of the school. The moment I breathed the word, a locker on my right popped open and slammed against the other lockers loudly, so I noped it out of that hallway, back outside. I have heard other stories of lockers opening with no reason, So I'm not sure if this was just a coincidence. I don't see how it could be, or if it really was the ghosts that haunt my school.
I have always seen and felt spirits. I was about 3 when this started. Also, since birth, I've had an imaginary friend named Amber. Amber was mischievous and jealous. She is like the older sister who is more childish than you. My grandmother swears that for as long as she can remember after learning that my mom was pregnant with me, there was a little blonde girl behind her, and then me after I was born. She said that she never get a good look at her face. That is, until the day I almost died from a fever. She claims that the little girl had an evil-looking smirk on her face. However, this is the clearest memory I have from my life then. I saw her face and she had a smile. Yes, however, it wasn't evil to me. It was as if to say, it's all going to be okay. That's all I remember up until I was 3. I remember being put in timeout for whatever reason. I was sitting there talking to Amber and playing games. I was allowed to get up and went into the kitchen to play with my toy cars, and I heard a child that wasn't Amber. I know this because this one was a male. It said, "I will have you," and I simply rolled my eyes and went back to playing with Amber. To this day, there have been things going on and children speaking to me the same way. Occasionally, they try to harm me. Amber is still around and just kind of shoos them away. I say child and children like that because they seemed more like grown adults that were trying to speak to small children, but they have been smoking from a young age. So, a while back, my brother was trying to find work. My brother found a job offer from one of his old friends. His friend's name was Jubal, and my brother's name was Jake. So, Jubal was a contractor and would work on houses so then he could turn around and sell them. Anyway, Jubal and my brother found a job on an old, creepy house. It looked okay on the outside, but what was on the inside was horrifying. So they started to work on it, and at one point Jubal went to get more tools for the job. 5 minutes later, my brother heard someone talking upstairs. So then he called for Jubal, but no one answered. 10 minutes later, finally, Jubal returned, and Jake told him about what happened. So the next day, they were going to leave the house for their lunch break, and when they left the house, it was around 80 degrees. But when they came back, the house was freezing cold. My brother joked with Jubal and said that they woke up the poltergeist. Then Jake came home from work one day and told me that I was going to go to work with him the next day. Since the house was close to my school, I just walked there after school. As soon as I walked in, there was just this really eerie feeling. So we were just doing some normal work, and then one of Jubal's friends, we'll call him Rusty, stopped by. All of them headed upstairs, and Jubal told me to sweep up one room that we were working on. As soon as they were upstairs, the basement went dead silent. So then all of a sudden, some boards that were leaning against the wall just fell over. I picked them up and swept up as fast as possible because I didn't want to be down there any longer. So about 3 days later, my brother Jake comes home from work again and told me that they were working on one of the closets upstairs and they found some weird writing on the studs behind the dry wall. The writing that they found just said 666. I am a 17-year-old female from the UK, and I was still 17 at the time the story takes place. It all started at some point last spring. I can't quite remember the date, but it was the month of May, a few weeks before I finished my first year of college. It was getting dark out, and we had to get 3 of our little Shetland ponies back home from the grass bank near our home. They get put there every day for grass and brought back at the end of the day. There are 2 lots of trees along the first bit of the grass bank. My siblings and I call them the little and big forest. The big one is on the left and the small one on the right. I was walking along the top of the bank, which was closer to the big forest. As I was walking along the first bit of the grass bank, I happened to look towards the little forest, and I saw this white figure just hiding in between the trees, looking right at me. I think I was more confused than scared when I saw it. Bear in mind, it was not completely dark outside yet, so I could still see where I was going clearly. I looked away, then looked back, and it was still there. So I knew I wasn't just seeing things. No tricks of the light. I decided to speedwalk as I started to feel unsafe. When I looked back to see if it was still there, I saw it had moved along the forest, still staring at me. I knew at that point I was being followed. When I get nervous when walking around at night, I talk to myself or seem to feel less scared. I know it's weird, but it actually helps. I was laughing this time, saying to myself, am I really bothered by something that might not even be there? I grabbed the ponies and started to walk back. As I was walking down the last bit of bank on the road, I thought I would look one more time to see if it was still there. This time it was running along the tree line, still looking towards me. I let go of 2 of the leads holding the ponies and 2 ran off home, and I started running with my last pony. I felt like I was in danger. I did look back one more time to see it had stopped at the end of the trees. I kept going until I got home, which was only a few hundred yards away. I shouted at it and told it to go away as I ran down the road. When I got back home, I put the horses away and ran inside. A few days later, after feeling like being watched all the time, I saw it again. Well, I heard it more than I saw it. It was after a boring day at college. A lot of people had finished earlier, but I had finished at 4:30. This is important because most people had left, so one of the commonly used paths to get to the college would be empty. I was walking down this long bit of path away from the college. When I was most of the way down the path, I heard what sounded like someone skipping behind me. I stopped, and so did the noise. But soon, it picked up again. It sounded like someone was walking not too far behind me. They sounded big because the footsteps were very loud. I am a paranoid person, as I had been followed before by people and a paranormal, so I looked behind me, and I saw nothing. No one was on the path near me, just a few people near the start of the path. No one walked into the nearby driveways as they were gravel ones, and I would have at least heard them. So there was no place to hide. I kept walking, and I heard it again, this time much closer, so I turned around really fast to see no one. But those footsteps were still coming towards me. They were getting closer and closer, but nothing was there to make the sounds. I kept turning around again and walking at the same time. At this point, I was practically jogging. I suddenly heard the footsteps get faster, as if someone was running towards me, keeping pace. I turned again and still nothing. I was now getting a little confused. I turned back around. It was going to run by then, and that's when I felt something grab my shoulder and pull me back. I hear a whisper. Then whatever it was did a really low laugh. It sounded demonic, and I felt whatever it was walk right through me. I got a really cold and horrible feeling. I stopped because I honestly had no clue what had just happened. I know some of you will think it might not be the same thing from before, but I felt the same way I did when I saw that thing from the forest. So about 2 weeks later, after this incident, I was home and it was around 10 or 11 at night. I had a bad craving for a glass of cold milk and chocolate chip cookies. I went down the set of stairs that lead to the kitchen to get what I wanted. There are 2 staircases in my house. It used to be a half a house, now a whole one. I went down the stairs that takes me straight to the kitchen. When I walked through the kitchen door, I saw something in the corner of my eye. There is a window to my right. The window looks into part of the back garden. So as I came through the door and noticed the thing in the corner of my eye, I turned a little more to look at it. I did a quick look, like I only looked for 2 seconds. And my heart did a backflip, and I took in so much detail of what I saw in those 2 seconds. This experience was traumatic, so how could I not remember these details? At first I thought it was some clothes, hanging outside on the line, but I looked again and nothing was there, and no clothes were on the line. I wish I could forget the face of this thing. It was disgusting. It had black eyes with a white shine to them. It had a broken and deranged smile. Its smile was crooked, like it wasn't on its face correctly. It had brown and piss-yellow teeth. They looked like they had been stuck into his mouth. They were just so uneven. It didn't even have a nose, whatever this thing was. But none of that bothered me. The part that I wish I didn't see was its face. It looked melted. It had all these weird lumps on its face that would pop. This is something I do not ever want to see again for as long as I live. I know it doesn't sound so believable, but this is true. I swear on my life that this is true, and it was the creepiest moment I've ever experienced. I grabbed what I came for and ran back to my room. All night, I had a cold sweat cover me, like when you wake up from a bad dream. Only a few times after that did I just glimpse it, and then I just stopped seeing it altogether. I just want to know what it was, and even more so, what it wanted. Thank you for listening.
In my elementary school, my mom was the music teacher and substitute for grades 4 to 6. One day, one of my main teachers was sick, so my mom took over her duties for half the day. Everything was going just fine, and my mom assigned us to do a story about our scariest moment in life. Being me, I never really had anything interesting about myself, so I just wrote something off the top of my head. Now, I was in grade 5 at the time, and half of the grade 6s also were in my class, so they had to do the same assignment too. Everything was going fine until we presented our stories. 13 of the stories were the exact same stories. I was freaked out because the story that everyone had told was about them lying in bed, suddenly woken up to a figure in their closet, and they described this figure as a girl of the age 9 or 10, with a white, torn, dirty dress and long black hair. I guess you could say it resembled the girl from The Ring. After that class, everything was chaos and people were alert like crazy. Some said they even saw her, not even an hour after the stories were told. I remember one person saw her in the hallway, while many others saw her on the playground. I think the creepiest part of that day was when I saw the girl sitting on the swing sets from my classroom window. And when I blinked, she was gone. I'm in grade 9 now, and many cases of paranormal activity in my old elementary school have still been told to me through my mother. To this day, I've never gone back to that school ever since I graduated. And number 8, An Old Soul, submitted by Wolves. So I was always a quiet boy. I was the kid that teachers set the talkers next to, the one who wouldn't talk back. They loved me. I got good grades and I never got in trouble. And this experience started taking place 3 years. It was June 4th when this all started. My mom, my dad, one of my mom's friends, and I had just moved into a new house. This house was a condo. The way this condo was set up was our rooms were on the bottom floor, and there were rooms above us. The first night there, we heard loud sounds. It sounded like chairs being dragged across the floor. At first, we didn't think much of it, because my parents are really big skeptics, and honestly, I am too. The second night, it happened again, so I started to keep track of how it happened and what time it happened. A week went by, and it was happening every night at the same time, 3 in the morning. I thought this was a little weird. I had heard that this was the witching hour. I was a bit spooked by it. A month goes by and my mom gets in a fight with her friend, so we had to find a new place. Eventually we did, and as we were moving, my mom said to me, "Me and your dad did not want to tell you this, but the chair noises upstairs annoyed me and your dad so much. We talked to the landlord and had him check up there. He said that there was no one living up there and that there was no furniture to be moved, but that there had been a suicide there a few years back." This stuck with me and still haunts me to this day. This is a short story, but it was scary enough to keep me out of the bathrooms or to avoid empty rooms in my school alone. It happened about 2 years ago that the power in our school cut out for about an hour or so. Me and my friends were at lunch eating when my friend Haley got up to use the bathroom. After a couple of minutes, she came back to our table, silent. She ate her lunch and tried to stay quiet. Finally, I asked her what was wrong. She said that when she went to the bathroom, she heard a stall door shut, and there was no other noises. If someone had entered the bathroom, she would have heard the heavy door open and shut, but she hadn't heard it. And there wasn't anyone in there when she had come in, so how did the other stall door shut? When she was done, she got up and used the Germex that was provided, since the electric was out. As she was doing so, she saw someone in the corner of her eye. She saw what seemed to be a black figure moving along the side of the doors behind her. She ran out fast. She came back quiet, and then she finally told me. After that, I went to the bathroom the next day. After I was getting out of the stall, I heard a loud bang, which made me sprint out of the stall and down the hall back to my class. I thought twice about ever going back to that bathroom.